So Mike, you were just saying about meeting best friends on the airplane when you opened the racing farm?
Yeah, I know. Yeah, the day when we had paper versions of our past performances, there would I can count on more than one hand the times I've stepped on a flight, particularly around Triple Crown time, and see somebody there with a daily racing form open, introduce myself, let them know that I'm also a huge horse racing fan, and then literally it's instant friendship and kinship. When you have a sport where it's more of a niche and there's not as many people, the passion's greater. So when you do meet somebody, you want to hold on because it is something that is unique that we then share with each other, which is why I love this sport.
Yeah, there's not especially nowadays. If you found somebody on a plane with opening a racing farm, I mean, you're probably going to invite them to well, not your wedding, but maybe your next event.
Your kid's wedding. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah, it's I know I remember back in the day I used to collect the charts because remember when you couldn't get them online
Yeah.
and you had to go through they were called simulcast weeklies. Remember that?
Yep. Yep.
I just
Absolutely.
used to build them up, and we used to cut them apart, and I had probably like 30 or 40 boxes of old racing forms and simulcast weeklies, and and then they just start to crumble over the years because they're made of that really crappy paper.
Exactly. Yeah. Hey, by the way, don't tell anybody at Northern Illinois University where I went to college that I would go to the library
Mm.
and I would pull the Chicago Tribune and I'd go in and I'd cut out the racing chart for Hawthorne and Arlington Park. And I'd have these racing charts then that I would accumulate so I could do all my own track variants and my part times and stuff. So, track class. So it was super manual, back then. But if anybody goes to the archives and they still have those newspapers, there could be a lot of charts missing.
I mean, horse players have to go to extreme ends to win at this game.
That's right. No
It's
doubt. And that was definitely my extreme there. But a big advantage, that was making your own figures was kind of a key advantage at the time.
Yeah, yeah. There was a time when I went to Keeneland, their Keeneland Library, and I I went through and because it's really cool. This is, probably 10 years ago, maybe 15 years ago, but they would give you every racing form, like from I think they went back into the 50s or 60s or something.
Yeah.
And I was able to take pictures and actually no, I couldn't take pictures because I didn't have my camera phone back then. I had to go to the Xerox machine and I Xeroxed probably like the last 50 years of Kentucky Derby horses and winners and stuff. And so just the whole PP. So I was just always trying to understand. And that's one thing that's interesting is if you were to go back, and I did this year as well, but not too far. I probably went 40 years, maybe a little bit longer. But the horses that used to win the Derby, like in the 80s and the 70s, I
Oh
mean,
yeah.
the speed demons that just cook, but there's a lot of mediocrity, like a lot of horses that were not coming off very good races
Right.
and somehow did it. And obviously the spacing was way different. They would race every couple weeks or whatever, but yeah.
Yeah. It was a different time. And you get these crops, where you get a good series of some really great 3-year-olds. And then I kind of consider this year's to be pretty mediocre, to be honest, just based on figures. And then even coming into the Preakness, I mean, take it another level lower. Great to have a full field, always great from a wagering perspective, but from a emerging future stars, it could be thin pickings this year.
I mean, do you think it's the worst Derby ever?
Uh, no, no, I kind of think the mind that bird one was pretty bad, but I think not the worst ever for sure, but in the last 10, 15 years, pretty down there.
Yeah, what do you like when you break this thing down? I think it's just fun to imagine um, the possibilities I mean, that's what's so cool about horse racing is you're constantly forecasting You're dreaming, you're blowing smoke up your own ass about why a
Yep.
horse won, or and then you try to figure it out, and then you just try to, even if you're wrong 60% of the time with your analysis, if you can make that one time correct, that can lead to profit, it doesn't matter if you don't necessarily understand all the reasons you lost the other races or derbies, but if you can figure out the pattern to profitability, doesn't matter.
Yeah, absolutely. No, well said. And that's the key is it's the patterns. It's probably, I don't know why, but even as a kid, loved solving puzzles.
Yeah.
Um, I like, I don't know, I was into statistic courses like in eighth grade.
Oh,
I
shit.
just like I like the power of prediction. I just thought, wow, if you put the work into it and you're able to, and I was always good at recognizing patterns quickly, and still do in my regular work daily, but it's so critical. But those that can do it best, aided with machine or not, it's really powerful, and it can lead to, as you had said, some pretty good consistent profitability.
Yeah, I think you have to have the wiring, and the threshold to play a game that is 2 times or 3 times as hard as almost every other gambling game or puzzle game, and it takes so much patience. I don't have a lot of patience, and I don't even understand how I fell into this. It kinda chose me, but there was some feels really special when you, like, even we'll talk about the derby and kinda break down the things we were kind of reverse engineering it, but there's something that's really special about seeing something that nobody else can see, and
Yeah,
I mean,
I just love that moment. And it's funny, it's one of these things where your brain recognizes the pattern, and immediately your body's kind of like on fire. Like you just have that moment where you go, like there's this locking mechanism that says, bang, there it is. Not too many, if anybody's going to see this. And it gets harder to do today. There's just so many good, really good um, mathematical, statistical, computer geniuses that have done a really good job of recognizing those patterns, using data, and finding new data in order to make these better predictions. But still, you can still find it today, and when you do, it's even more special now because it doesn't happen as frequently. But when you do find it now, you've got to pounce on it because they just don't come up as often as they used to.
you know, I remember you telling me that story when you took down, like, the whole pool for the superfecta at Santa Anita that one time.
Yeah,
'Cause you keyed,
yeah,
like,
that
what was that story? It was, like, some big long shot that you keyed, and what did he come
yeah,
up?
it was an 80-1 shot that actually finished second in the race. Um, and it was a 5-year-old that was a first-time starter. And it was 80 years old, or 80-1. And I looked at it and I looked at the field and I said, I mean, there wasn't a bris or a buyer figure higher than 60, in the field, and par for the race was 70 something. And I said, geez, 80-1? I mean, I get
Mm.
it, five, who knows? The works weren't all that great. Decent barn. Um, so I said, no, no, no one's going to use this as their vertical single, let alone a horizontal single. Too bad that didn't work out. But the vertical single worked out just fine. And yeah, it was taking down the whole superfecta pool on that day. Never to happen again. Close, but never to happen again. But that was exciting. Almost as exciting as um, being one horse away from taking down a $1.5 million Del Mar pick six. I think it was 2011,
Mm.
um, where I had locked into a couple of 20-1 shots that came through on that day. John Doyle was with me up in the press box, and he was giving some good tutoring on. I'm not typically a horizontal player, but I decided to play that day. And so I'm alive to three horses going into that very last race. Um, and one of them, Trevor Denman says, like a quarter horse. I go, okay, he's finished. So he's out in front by about, 15 lengths. So I know that horse isn't going to have a shot. But my other two horses were sitting pretty chilly off that. And everybody in the press box was gathered outside on the balcony there and hoping to cheer me on and congratulate. And so come down the stretch, here come my other two horses. They're and the other one, the front runner's fading.
Mm.
And then in the corner of my eye on the rail, kind of hidden by my two horses, was another horse gathering momentum.
Oh,
And it happened to be a first time starter that I did not use, at least in this wager.
mm.
And he was coming pretty good. And then it's getting awfully close to the wire. I wasn't feeling as optimistic. And then it was a photo finish and really tough. It was hard to tell. It took a long time.
Oh,
Photo did not come up in my favor. And the trainer of that horse won the pick six on that day. And then there was a great controversy because he had promised to pay the barn helpers and then didn't do that. And it started hitting
who was
kind of
the
the
trainer? Remember? What was it? Do you remember
Aguirre,
Aguirre? Oh, Paul Aguirre. Do you
Paul
remember
Aguirre.
do you remember the name of a horse? I could bring it up on Equibase in the background for me and just think about it.
No, all I remember was the three horse. It was in August and it was 2011. And it was,
Yeah.
when the pick six was 1.5 million. Yeah, I don't remember the name of the horse at all, but that one was a killer. Now, thank goodness, Doyle said, "Hey, don't forget to bet big win on every other horse in the race that you
Yeah.
didn't pick. That
Yeah.
even if you don't think they have a chance. So that
Yeah.
there was some redemption there. And then, of course, the five. I had a lot. I had the five a couple of times, so that it paid pretty good, 15,000 each. So it was a good day, but.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think I kind of walked away with, 50 grand and never felt so disappointed in my life.
No, the gut punches, the
That
slap.
was the biggest gut punch. Even when I replay it, it's like I cringe. Like, ah, man, that agony of defeat. I felt like that skier on Wild World of Sports tumbling to his demise. But
But
it
you still
was
crossed the finish line. You still got, a participation trophy.
I did get. I guess I did get the dubious participation trophy. That's right. That's right. So yeah, but hey, that kept me coming back though. That's what this game does to you.
How do you deal with the ups and the downs of it? Like when you obviously something like that, you still walked away with something, but like do you when something happens like that or when you miss a piece of data or you don't get a bet in on time or I mean it doesn't to me I don't know if you feel the same way, but when you're wrong, it doesn't hurt. It's more like when you screw up or you're really close or a horse had some trouble. Like
Yeah.
so do you just brush it off? Do you go for a run? Do you eat ice cream? Do you like just, pretend like do you just go watch a movie? How do you get it out of your system?
Yeah, I've learned a long time ago on everything, with life. I kind of take, the lessons from meditation and some of the early fathers from the third century who were out in the desert and kind of teach you how to stay right here on the ups, right here on those downs. Remember, you don't control it. Kind of get detached from outcomes, right?
Mm,
The And what I've done is I don't get too upset if I'm making a new mistake or a new error. That's just learning. Um, but where I beat myself up is if I make the same mistake twice. That's that's unacceptable. And that's just sometimes being stubborn on, no, this is the pattern. And then you kind of really know maybe in your heart it isn't, and you stick with it.
yeah.
And then fail. That to me is no matter how even keel I can be, I'm getting upset with myself. But what I typically do is I just get up, whatever I'm doing, I get away from that space and essentially give myself a self-inflicted timeout and just kind of regather, and knowing that now that it's already in the past, it's moving rapidly behind me, and there's a future in front of me, and you got to just uh, stay focused, let it go, and on we go. It's not easy. I don't have that down by any means. I don't think anybody can get fully detached even at the end of their life. But I'm better because I have had more at bats and I've learned how to deal with it better over time. So it's just one of those things. Yeah, there have been some derbies too where I remember sitting in a on a rainy, cold derby where Icebox finished second uh, behind, I think that was Super Saver at
Yep.
that time.
Yep.
And I'm looking at my buddy Mark Midland, the kind of the guy running the whole Horse Racing Nation show now,
Yeah.
and we're both we're the place is emptying, and we're just sitting there looking at our tickets, just shaking our heads and saying we were up all night. We had Super Saver locked, like single on top, and we loved Icebox under. But why didn't we use him in second? We used him in third and fourth, and it was what, $100,000 superfecta. So it's
Yeah.
just one of those where you just mourn for a while. You mourn your loss and brush it off as best you can and move on. But it wasn't until we got up out of those chairs that that feeling of remorse and devastation began to lift. And we had a good day the rest of the day, so you kind of had to look at that. And then by the time we're at dinner, we're laughing it off. But it's ugh, those are tough moments because you should have and you didn't, and that's the mistake you don't want to make twice. Never again did we take a top long shot pick and not use it in second, which then
Mhm.
led to Commanding Curve, Golden Soul, looking at Lee, I think was another one, several others where, had we not had that mistake and it burned
Yeah.
so hard, um, we probably wouldn't have been more generous in using our top long shot picks and higher in order.
Yeah, it makes me wonder sometimes how we can stomach this, you know? It's like it's such a weird, frequency where we work so hard at something, we have this intelligence, we know what people don't know,
Right.
and then something gets in the way, and like you said, it's just the strangest feeling to get that close to, like, 1,500,000 or, you know, I mean, I've made mistakes that you wouldn't even believe, just not even knowing horses are in there's a Breeders' Cup where I didn't even know a horse was in a race, and, like, things like that, and you're just
Yeah.
and you can't make this kinda stuff up. You're just like, "It's not my journey to do this today," and like you said, it builds you stronger so the future is ready, you know, you're ready to deliver, but I don't know, it's not for the faint of heart, and I love that most players understand that, so, like, that's why you talk about meeting somebody on the plane,
Yeah.
and you instantly have a bond, it's like you're in a fraternity that you've gone through this, you know, these BS self-sabotage things to, just errors, and you have to learn, and that's why it's hard to find, um, players to relate to and to talk to, and it's also strange because I mean, obviously, you're a public facing guy now, and you've started the super screener, and you've done really well on one of the biggest days, and you share all these insights, and you're basically revealing a lot to people. And I guess when you look at Golden Tempo, you know, we went to lunch right before the Derby, and we talked about this. We talked a little bit about the race, and you know, you were keen that he was your number one long shot, and we talked about the pace. Um,
Mhm.
and you were convinced it was gonna be good, and I was a little more skeptical, I wasn't sure, but, I did do some work on the pace, and I saw that it was actually yeah, like, that 6 speed had run fast, um, and then I think I had mentioned to you that I went to the trainer dinner, and talked to
Right.
the trainers and the owners, and they're like, "Yeah, yeah, he's fast, but he can sit off," like, and they weren't saying it to, like, try to be sneaky or the trainer's like, "Yeah, I mean, I think he can go, but he doesn't have to go." And he said it with a straight face, and so it was and it wasn't I wasn't of the ballpark that the pace couldn't melt down. Um, I was in the position where no horse to me justified, a bet that was under 20 to 1,
Right.
And I just got greedy and focused on I also thought maybe what if it goes slow this year and they go average, even though I don't just historically like betting the front end of the Derby. But I said, what if they do? I want to have that covered. And in the tournament, I wasn't able to have enough bankroll to come back with Golden Tempo, even though I looked at that exacta like in the eye, and it was just paying too low for me. But when you look at Golden Tempo right now, and now that the Derby is over, and you see what happened, how do you explain, his win, but also how do you explain the race? How do you walk through like some of the horses not running? Like if you just had to kind of like give it an overview, like how would you, just describe it all?
Yeah. Well, funny thing is when I came away from that race, the first, watching it from gate to wire, the first thought that crossed my mind when Golden Tempo crossed that finish line and Renegade was second. It's weird, but the first thought I had was I said, man, Denon Bourbon ran one hell of a race.
Mhm.
That was my I'm so fixed on, kind of the setup and, which horse actually put in the best effort here. I mean, I can start seeing it collapsing now. O'Sally's coming. I'm like, oh man, O'Sally's coming. This is really falling apart. And I said, no, please, Lord, you can't have no O'Sally in the exacta. And fortunately, I saw the two horses on the outside and they were obviously going to gobble up and go past. But that was the first thought that crossed my mind was, dang, had that horse rated better or whatever, wasn't so forward, maybe Denon Bourbon would be right there, and he certainly was for a moment. But yeah,
Yeah.
then my other thought that I said was if Golden Tempo runs in the Preakness or runs in the Belmont Stakes, I mean, I'd have to go look at the race and see what kind of pace setup there is and such, but I wouldn't see a repeat. I think this was just one of your typical Rich Strikes type derbies where uh, everything fell apart and played purely into this horse's energy distribution profile. Um, the horse was improving as we talked about. I loved all the patterns of this horse coming to this race. This was his opportunity, but he would need a pace collapse in order to, you know, he'd need to move forward. But that wouldn't be enough. He'd need that assistance from a pretty good pace collapse, and I think that helped him. I think Renegade, if he didn't get banged around so much and in the beginning, etc., would have maybe been there first. But I think it just played right into Golden Tempo's right into the race flow for a positive race flow for him. And
Yeah.
hats off to the connections for staying out of trouble for the most part, and then playing into the pace.
Yeah, it's I'm always like questioning everything. I mean,
Got to.
I mean, I think it's easy when you spend a lot of time by yourself to question the thoughts that enter your brain, the decisions you make about horse racing, the decisions you make about life, the things you do and do not say, the risks you take. Um, and I always turn it over. So I look at it from a lot of different places. I look at it from, okay, what does the media say, or what are the mainstream, people that I don't know, just like to publicly talk about horse racing in some way to kind of, I don't know. There's like this wisdom of crowds, like fraternity, where everyone wants to kind of like agree with each other,
Yeah.
and then there's like guys like us. Not saying that you do or do you don't maybe go off the beaten path as much as I do, but I'm still I'm still like questioning a lot um, about the narratives right now in the Derby. I think the first question that you just talked about is the pace of the Derby. Um, it's like the pace was to me, like average. And
It's funny. Yeah, funny you should say this, which is, I always like watching the fractions because we predicted 46 and 1 and 110 and 4. And it was what, 46 and 2, 110 and 4.
mm,
So applause on the getting it right. However, I mean, literally, these things usually don't fall apart unless you're in, 45 and change and, 110 and 1 and sub, right? So I didn't see that. So now I was actually a little worried in the beginning of the race going,
mhm.
that's not quite the pace collapse type of fractions. The other thought in my head, and maybe you had this as well, I did say, though, but the quality of this field isn't what one would expect to hold up even under those fractions. So I was a little bit encouraged because I knew going in that there's not a lot of quality here. And maybe, just maybe, with even that kind of pace, which I'd say was on the faster side of moderate. Um, and, it worked out. But you're so right. I'm so glad you said that in terms of it wasn't pace collapse fractions. It really wasn't.
And I think that's the interesting part of being a gambler or a horse player is that we're always trying to be right. And right is a spectrum. It's actually really about value, but there's a correlation to how how much probability can you capture with respect to the value. And when we look at a race afterwards, right, it's like, oh, okay, why did I lose? And then the ego doesn't want to be like, oh, I couldn't predict this pace collapse. It must have been this or whatever. So we have the stories, and I was. Do you mind if I share with you like a document on the pace?
Yeah.
Let me see if I can do this. I haven't done this before on here. Let me find if I can get to the document. Let me see if I is this not as easy? I can.
I think there's that present screen below, and then
Yeah, I got it. I had to click on window, but can you see this document now?
yeah, yep,
So when we talk about the pace, and I was just sifting through this week, and you think about six speed went 22.6. So it seems pretty fast, but in the last 40 years, it's like you said, kind of moderately faster. So it's nothing like, I mean, you want to talk about a horse who ran a hell of a race was Bodemeister. Um,
yeah,
man, but yeah, so you look at these fractions and you say, okay, he's going 39.68 miles per hour. And you look at this and you're like, okay, yeah, Palace Malice ran his eyeballs out early, Dancing Candy 2, Conveyance, whatever. But it's definitely average to slightly above average. But when you look at this, I can't scream, fast. And then you look here and you start looking at the second quarter, and like you said, you predicted it, almost spot on, which is amazing. Which I mean, picking pace is like you're only going to be right like 25% of the time. But
right,
like when you think about this, I mean, maximum security. Oh, granted, it was wet, so there's like the condition to think about. Medina Spirit, was only a length and a half slower
right,
early. Lionheart, which a horse I wouldn't really ever bet on. You know, he, he was hanging in there for what second I think in the Derby. So like,
yeah,
so it's interesting to think about these narratives that happen. When it's like who's. It's so interesting watching the tide like come in now. Everyone says, "Oh, 3 closers came in. It must have been fast." Well, like you said before, this was one of the worst fields I've ever seen in the Kentucky Derby, which is why I said you need 20 to 1. And I'm like, okay, Golden Tempo happened to be in the probably the better position of the race, given the mediocrity and the distance, the challenges of the bumpings and the things. And I don't even know if Renegade would have won this race regardless. So it's like I think we have to be careful to like jump on on a rationale until we see more data, but keep asking questions, right? Like,
Right.
when you see that, I mean, does that make you, I mean, maybe you were right because everybody was also just below average and the pace was okay, but I mean, it's I don't know.
Yeah, for this class of horses, I would have said this pace was, if you kind of use that as a barometer, general class, I would have said this pace then was more demanding because if you watch the prep races, I was really disappointed in the prep races because it wasn't as if you had, I guess everybody said the Florida Derby was, the highest quality. I don't know about that, to be honest. Um, and then the further ado runoff, a whole different story. We know how those things are, generally false. But I think, what it was is you had a lot of horses that were, the forward types that, got some great pace setups. They didn't need to have a lot of reserve energy in the final portion of the race to win it. So it wasn't like you had a bunch of, even, in some of those years where you really had a more solid pace, but some of the speed hung on, these were horses that after doling out like 100 plus pace figures, they were still knocking a 90 in their late pace, column, if you will.
Mhm.
So it wasn't just about unload early and hope to hang on late. They were solid quality horses that would not be a suspect to a pace like this or faster. I just think you had a lot of weak-hearted horses that, got to the Derby in a very weak year, and they just weren't the type of caliber that we typically see, at least in those that are forward, where they have a bit more reserve energy than the kind of field we had this year.
Yeah, yeah, it's every year is different. It's every single
Yep.
year, and that doesn't mean I'm going to be right either, because I have like some favorites in the past and not been willing to take a stand against them. But this distance is so grueling, and I just I think it's fascinating to watch the tide pools like build around storylines, and I think it'll be interesting to see after even this, like how many people start talking about the pace, given that I'm bringing up that it's to me average. And I think the true proof will be if Denon Bourbon comes back. If Denon Bourbon comes back in the US and runs well and wins the Belmont or the Haskell, yeah, that narrative is right.
Correct. Yep.
But if he doesn't, then it's just, and I don't think people do enough postmortem to think about, where their mind was jaded or influenced, because everybody, I don't know, it's like we all want simplicity. We all want to understand something, why someone hurt us, why someone cheated on us, why someone betrayed us in business, why we didn't have the horse or why we made the mistake. And it's a loop that is important, I think, to
Yep.
gaining wisdom, but it's not always what it seems. And I think that's where we have to step away, like do some meditation, like you're saying, and just sit there and be like, okay, like what really happened? And I think, like, to your point, like I I can't wait to bet against, the top 3 horses in the Belmont. Like, I think, and
Yeah.
obviously I'm not somebody that's forward facing with my opinions very often ever, but, I think because it is this jewel that everyone's discussing, I think, and the money is gonna come on those 2. I don't know if I'll have a horse though, because, like, I also have to have I have to
Yeah.
have a horse.
Who steps up, right? Yeah. Well, if
Yeah.
Denon Bourbon ran back for whatever reason, I don't think he will, but I certainly be a little more focused on that. Again, could be dead wrong, but that would certainly be validating, like you had said, that indeed we've got a pretty weak class of horses here. The what's interesting, same thing as you had said earlier about, you know, um, being creative, questioning. So right now, as soon as I hear everyone saying, "Oh, the Preakness, it's going to be a pace collapse race. There's too much speed in the race," and um, I'm I'm not fully buying that yet. My initial calculations so far say it'll be faster than par, but I
Wait,
think a lot of the
why do you
horse
say that? Why do you say that off the top of your head?
the faster than par.
Mhm.
When I break it all down, and I look at the pace figures, in terms of, and what I look for is not just one shot where you got, oh, 105, but I'm looking for sort of what was more their norm and lay all that out. And then, where I see them clustering, I can say, okay, there isn't just some one horse that's way out there pulling up the average. There has to be some clustering. It has to make sense. And when I do that, the first fraction is going to be faster than par. But the second fraction, when they get to the 6 furlong moment, par, maybe.
Who's going to be on the lead, do you think? Like, I mean, Taj Mahal is hard to read too. Like, I don't know how
I
fast
think
that
that
one.
one, yeah. I think those pace figures, even in Briss, I think I don't think they're accurate. Well, they are what they are, but again, it's like the further ado. I don't. You got to take horses that blew the field away or open length winners, throughout the entire race. Those figures come back so inflated. Um, Further ado being a testament to that. For who we faded, that was one of the favorite types that we faded. The the I think Robusta got a bad break. And I think that horse will in the Preakness, I think will be leveraged, because I just remember Doug O'Neill before the race, go, 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 go. That was the strategy. And I think that will be the strategy here, whether that makes sense or not. And then Eskimo Kid, is that a horse in the race? I'm trying to remember the name. I think that one will be out there out front. And Napoleon Solo, I don't care what the connections say. I mean, that's going to be a great one-turn horse. But that horse is all early, and if you watch, he's very difficult to rate. So I think Napoleon Solo could be the pace leader in all of this. But it's those three. Um, Chip Honcho will be reserved. He's rateable. I think, kind of like that horse a bit. Uh, Iron Honor, can't take him out of his game, but I don't think he's an all-out pace type. But he'll be forward. And then Talkins in there, and the low quality horse. Taj Mahal, like you said, he'll be forward, but I don't think he's the pace leader. So there'll be plenty of horses out front. There'll be pressure. There'll be pace pressure.
Hmm.
And it'll be more so early, but I think it'll moderate as this race goes on. Unlike the Derby, where it just obviously continued through the mile marker, in fact, and then some. So yeah, I think they'll speed out, and you got that shorter run to the first turn. We'll see who draws the outside. There's a lot of speed that drew to the outside, and they've got to use up energy to get position. That'll make, the case for perhaps a little bit of collapsing more favorable, but so we'll see what that draw does. But yeah, I don't see this the same as the Derby in terms of, and the quality of this field is, I mean,
Hmm.
think about it. I mean, this is not, again, I'll take the full field. Awesome. That'll be potentially a great betting race, but um, really low on quality.
Yeah, I don't know what to say about the race. I don't even.
Yeah, I think if I'm a jockey, I sit on my horse. If it can rate, fantastic. Don't go too far back. Just let them all come back to you. I mean, I think that's the way to ride this race, probably. So, um, but we'll see. Well, final field's not even close yet, even though it feels that way on a Saturday. But we'll see.
Yeah, I think having it at Laurel is also interesting. Um, I I mean, do they normally run races at a mile and 3/16 at Laurel?
No, there've been six in the last, I forgot how many years. I just read something about it this morning.
Hmm.
Um, and it has been all over the board. A horse won coming from 22 lengths off, and one horse went gate to wire, but most of them all seem to be, pretty well off the pace, the other four. So that's the only history we have.
Yeah, see, like that's a classic example of a situation that I don't really want to mess with, right? It's like if
Yeah,
there's not a lot of data and there's not a lot of and I don't know if it's going to rain either, which will make it even more
right.
complicated.
And
So
none of those six races were 14 horse fields either. I mean, that's the other.
Hmm.
other factor. They were shorter fields, so that creates a whole different dynamic.
Yeah, so I mean, this is just a classic pass for me, like in terms of, making a wager, but the tournaments are the tournaments,
That's
and
right. You got to play to win, right? But yeah, yeah, we'll see. I don't have any. If I don't have a strong opinion, I will be in the pass mode as well. I just haven't had enough finality to be able to draw that conclusion just yet, but I will. And if I don't have the conviction like I did with Renegade and Golden Tempo, if I can't find my pair, I'm
yeah.
gonna not despair.
I know it's yeah, it's it's just like certain times, like know your sweet spots and,
Yeah.
like taking on, a race that's subpar, new track, who knows what the weather's going to be.
Yep.
I think as horse players, like it's like people want to be right. Like everyone wants to call. Like obviously, when you have an opinion, whether it's a derby or not, and it's something you stand for, you want to shout at the mountaintops to some degree because you work your whole life at this. But um, I guess if I were to ask you just really quickly to wrap up on the Preakness, um, what would be like the minimum odds you would take on a horse? I mean, but it's so early and you don't know, but do you have any kind of odds lines that would you bet on a horse below 5-1 in the Preakness, or was that like a hard stop for you, or
Hard stop.
yeah,
This year, hard stop. Yeah, if it's not double digits, it wouldn't even draw any attention at all. And I'm talking about for the win,
yeah.
in particular. So yeah, and then in the exacta pool, I'd be pursuing your strategy from the Derby. Um, I'd be looking for the 50 to oneers. And if I was in a tournament, especially, I'd be doing that. So yeah, if I'm going to play this race, and it's not one of these things where, a lot of people come off a, good win like we had, great pat on the back. But some folks tend to get that invincible feeling like, oh man, that means I can never be wrong again. So let me come into the Preakness and go crush that as well. Um, yeah, I don't I don't have that feeling whatsoever. Again, something may crop up between now and Monday or now and next week, but I yeah, I would demand a ton of value in this race, no question.
um let's like shift into just like the industry and think a little bit more about helping horse players, but before I get, we have a little brainstorm session on that. um what do you think of Churchill buying the IP rights to the Preakness? Do you if I know you have an ad, background, and you've done a lot of, big things in advertising, like, do you see that as I don't know, as a big move, as a like predictable thing? Do you think that it, allows them to potentially do something with this race that hasn't been done before, given their kind of their, difficult to work with reputation?
Yeah, yeah, I think it's just from a pure business standpoint and knowing that these guys are well armed financially, um, and in a sport where we need really strong marketing power and we need dollars behind it. I have no objection, and I would actually be very supportive of anything any organization could do to prop up the Preakness, put more money behind it, make it a more interesting second part of the Triple Crown. Uh, I, I totally applaud it. No matter what some people think or don't think about Churchill Downs, if it's going to help the sport and it's going to make that race a little more shiny than it has been in the last several years, fantastic.
Do you think that they should just move the Preakness after the Belmont?
Hmm, that's a great question. What did we do in the pandemic year? I can't remember the order. It was,
Yeah, I don't remember either.
yeah, it was odd, obviously, but no, why do you say that? Why
Well, I guess I saw a tweet from Bobby Flay, about like first Saturday in May, Kentucky Derby, first Saturday May in June, Belmont, I think first Saturday in July, Preakness. And it got me thinking, why would we now, granted, I know there's a lot of financial rationale behind that date for the Preakness at that track. Um,
Sure.
and I'm just always thinking outside the box, but I wonder if you could do an event that's 2 weeks after the Derby, and it's not called the Preakness, it's called you know, the um, I'm trying to come up with like a gimmick word that would be like a play off of the Preakness, but like, like the almost Preakness or something. I don't know. And that's not for Kentucky Derby horses, but maybe it's for 3-year-olds that want to come out of like the Pat Day Mile or something else. So it's still a stakes day, and there's still like the event that's held at the venue. And if I was an executive, I would try my best to leverage that brand and push it to another day. And it's interesting because if Churchill owns this, like whether it's the first, Saturday in July or whatever, like if Churchill owns the IP for the Preakness, could they run it at Churchill Downs? Like, and not let somebody else call it the Preakness and literally just
Yeah.
push it, and I mean, there could still be a almost Preakness that's on, the second 2 weeks after the Derby, but could they just swipe the name and throw it after the Belmont at Churchill Downs? Is that even, is that totally far off? I don't even know.
Yeah, I thought it was at least a possibility, behind this whole IP purchase that, first thought you have is, well, does that mean they love to see this move to Churchill Downs? I mean, it's
Yeah.
sort of the next, like, okay, what happens after that? Yeah, I mean, I think it's feasible. Can they do it? That's another story, but um, I would say that I would keep that in the realm of possibility for sure.
I mean, it would be so the funny part is people still bet on this stuff. But first of
Right.
all, we should talk about the huge drop in the Derby handle, 10 million, you know, hit. Like everyone's talking about the viewership. You want to talk about a face plant on the betting in the Derby when you're supposed to be growing as a normal corporation at 20% a year, 15% a year, depending on the revenue size. But this is this is again one of these narratives that's not present. It's like, first female trainer, awesome, support that. But, slow times, I'm going to say the pace is pretty average, which is also contradictory. And then you've got um, the Derby handle down. And so it's
Yeah.
like this is another wake up call, a warning sign to the industry that you're failing to reach the younger customers. And I I would not be surprised if there's another 3-year-old race for those horses, but again, the Haskell is a Haskell, like there's all these, conflicting forces, but it's very clear um that it's feast or famine right now. And I could
Yeah.
easily see some like very aggressive decisions made around these bigger races and who's going to own those bigger races, because that's the marketing. That's where you can get new customers. That's where you can, really make the sport pop, and that's where the TV rights are. So, yeah, I'm open to anything, but I wanted to ask you. So when you think about where we're going right now, man, like it's like it's pretty. The future is dim, and I'm not a negative person, and I'm also not an unrealistic optimist. But I do like to see the brighter side of everything. But like if you start looking at the I guess at the structure of the industry, and the fact is you've got regulators, you've got state by state stuff, you've got HISA, you've got um, racetracks, you've got horsemen, and you've got customers, and then you've got a dying customer demographic. Like if if we're going to grow this game, we need like a huge injection of innovation or something, because the last 20 years, the marketing's not working. You know, having, I'm starting a channel for Out of the Woodwork to adventure and get some smart gamblers together to see what happens and have fun. And, but like you look at a lot of the channels, they have like 10,000 viewers, like that's nothing. Like
Right.
having 10,000 viewers on a horse racing channel, and they're not even really, there's some great people behind. I like what the HHH guys do to try to, break down cards. I think that's really cool that they bring on different varieties of hosts. I think that's important to try to teach people this game.
Sure.
Um, but the curve is so high. So, and given just the general like fluff media that doesn't really help people win ever, like what can we do like to get, the numbers to kind of rival, the fantasy world or the sports betting world? And, do you have any, I don't know, instincts around,
Yeah.
change?
Yeah. I mean, I think the first thing is we we kind of have this collective, what's the industry, doing about this? And I kind of turn that around and go, well, yeah, that's a question, but what are we, each of us individually
Yeah.
doing about this, right? So, the super screener is supposed to be educational and it reaches, people. It's still growing. I mean, that's great, so hopefully it's profiling the audience. There are definitely young people that are increasingly becoming part of that. And I think the education is key. And then making it easy, I think that's the other component. My daughter's an influencer, and she was hired by Del Mar in the Breeders' Cup, to promote those races. We don't use influencers enough, particularly when they're covering other topics. And if you look at any other industry and the use of social media, and particularly using the like persons that you want to bring into a specific space, this is, this is where the younger audiences are following specific uh, individuals and specific channels. And if we're not fully exploiting that as an industry, or any of us individually, shame on us. I'm just as guilty. I don't use a lot of social media, I just don't have a lot of time. But I certainly know that that's one of the paths to success. Also, look around the world, and where horse racing is doing better than average, you got to ask yourself why, what's being done there, what are the success patterns. Look at boutique meets in the US. I mean, is Handle growing? Not rapidly, but there are some meets that obviously are holding their own. You think about Keeneland and Saratoga in particular. Um, but yeah, I mean, it's the what's working and how do we do more of that? And then what do we each do individually? I don't know about you. I'm going to ask you this. I'll share what I've done, and then I
Yeah.
want to ask you the same question I've asked myself. How do I do this? How do I get more people in it? I have a vested interest to do so. We both do. We all do. And one of the things I did throughout my career, so I owned an advertising agency for a long time, and I worked with a lot of corporations, and I would do client entertainment. So, and they were always at, you always had to raise the bar, like from your last event to your next event. And I enjoyed doing it. And what I did with every one of those clients is at some point host an event at a racetrack. I mean, there's one night where it's Turfway Park because the client's in Cincinnati. But I mean, we would do that, and I would do it all the time at Arlington Park because I had a lot of clients in the Chicago area. So, and here's what would happen, Christian, if you made it tons of fun, made it easy, before you all went there, you got in a room, you handed out like pre-purchased wagering tickets so that no one have to reach in their pocket. You do a little education for those who do, and then you go to the track, you create contests with one another, easy,
Yep.
super easy ones, but contests. And at the end of the day, people would say, I never knew that horse racing could be so fun, so cool. And to this day, those are not everybody who came to that event would then go on to go to another race, but a good number of them will. And many of them today from 20 years ago, they'll still say, "Hey, Shutty, you got your Kentucky Derby Super Screener," and they may still be casual fans, but they're fans. and they somehow participated in the game after that one event. And we just don't do enough of that. And there could be all of us leading corporate events, hosting groups of people at the track,
Mhm.
and kind of converting them. So, and I know you do a lot, especially to engage younger people and to make the sport shine in their eyes, especially compared to competitive interests like sports gaming. But how do you do it? What else are you doing? I mean,
Yeah.
you
I mean, it's one of these things, it's like, how do you make your I mean, I'm not married, but how do you make your wife happier if you're a guy, right? It's like, there's only so many things that you can see, that you can do, you can anticipate. Your partner, your girlfriend, you're, like, trying to read between the lines, and then there's just the fact that it's never gonna end. You're never gonna get to a place where you've got to the top of the mountain and you're done making her happy, or you're done, making customers happy. There's evolution in games and competition. I think you have to do exactly what you said, which is you have to, tighten your bootstraps and say, what am I going to do here? Because if I love this game and I don't want to see it die, okay, how's the game scored? Well, unfortunately, you're literally going to pay 3 times as much money to play it, which is already a huge hindrance. I think
yeah,
casually, the more introductions and taking people to races is something that everybody should do. I think every horse player should take, you know, and I there's the fun part of it, and then there's the business part of it. So I think you want to take some friends that are you just want to have a good time. That's great, but I think you have to think of it as an ambassador. Everybody has to be an ambassador and bring people to the track and show them um, how to actually think about. Again, you have to qualify them and make sure they're gamblers. So
right.
if you're gonna have your fun, have your fun. But when you talk about entertaining clients, or people that are successful or have the disposable income, I think it's about creating a very clear archetype. And I would say it's the engineers, it's the recent grads of college that are still young enough, that have like the curiosity, that want to maybe look good on social media for hitting a race or doing something that nobody does well. I think it's about understanding risk assessment, and you know having some inclination to um, to try to crack codes or solve puzzles or look at patterns. And I mean, even out of I mean, I went to engineering school at UCLA, and I would say like 1% of them or 2% of them could be gamblers. So
Yep.
it's still it's still a very small, group of groups of minds that could take this on. So I would say qualifying the clients, as you say, finding the right people every year, like every month. Like I'm in Del Mar, like I could take somebody to a really nice experience. I have no
Yeah.
excuse.
Same.
But
Yeah. Fortunately, I have a couple of clients who've never been that I formed those partnerships earlier in the year, and I cannot tell you because I mentioned, hey, we got to go to the track, and and they said, I love it. I've never been to Del Mar. I live, in La Jolla, and now it's kind of like every time we talk, it's like, hey, when does the meet open? Like, when are we going? And they're dead serious about it. I'm going, and we're going to make that happen. Here's a question for you. So when I look at the racetracks. They advertise. Some of them have been pulling back because of the not getting the return, right? Um, but how many how many tracks that you're aware of will actually reach out to corporations to do group events, like actively
mm,
market them, not send an email to someone who's already had an event, the year prior or years prior, just to kind of as a reminder. But out there, their sole purpose is, which just happens in every one of our businesses where you have customers. What's it all about? It's about customer acquisition, right? If you are not doing good customer acquisition, you are going to die as a company. So, what are tracks doing in terms of personally reaching out to larger organizations to create events? They're the ambassador, if you will. And they might even have a team of people that when you get there in that event, that person is you, me, somebody that's locked in and
Yeah.
can really share and create the experience that any track would want. I don't know of any track that is that proactive or is that active in terms of reaching out to the local communities of corporations around those tracks to get people out to those tracks.
I would start with, it's gonna depend. Okay, so there's only a few, there's a select number of racetracks that could, I think, offer, a tier 1 or tier 2 experience. So you're gonna be
Right.
limited to, and then you have at the tracks, you have this amount of space that's available to be used, right? And then there's the
For
ROI
sure.
on the space and so forth.
Right.
So I think there's, obviously Churchill has an amazing facility, Keeneland has an amazing facility, but you would still think that there would be more action. We'll see what happens with Keeneland's new, with their whole new experience. So maybe they can,
Sure.
but I don't. It's still not solving the problem. Like the problem is to grow at a 20% rate per year, and
Right.
I think that I would I would say that AI coming in could, if you walked into a racetrack, and almost every person now should have a gambling app on their phone, which is also a weird thing because if somebody sign in or come into the track, they make more money when you bet on the track, but they they should be encouraging them to move to an app, and then maybe they like, I don't know how the source market fees work or however that works, but if I were, a company that had somebody on track, I would want to capture them digitally as quickly as possible.
Yep.
Um, but I would also say that, there's this conflict because, as you know, we have dedicated our lives to this and we have certain IP, certain, and granted, you share a lot with the super screener, and that's really, really nice. So people can really understand, the Derby and its intricacies, but, um, that IP is precious. And so how much do we disclose? Because if somebody bets 5,000 or $10,000 down on a horse, it'll go from 12 to 1 to 5 to 1. Um, and so there's fundamentally, um, a problem with parimutuel wagering when you're trying to teach people how to play the game, and because all it takes is someone to get a good reputation, and then they can be tracked. And just like in all the sharks, like, the majority of past Dr. Nick and Jelko, the majority of the people are just following, that money in one way or the other and tracking
Yep.
it and so forth. So you've got leeches upon leeches. And so the same thing can happen in the horse player community. And that's where it puts, guys like us in a weird spot because you want to teach people how to fish. Um, but also there's only so many fish in the pond now because it's almost empty. So like the amount of bets I find now are so few and far between, you just have to wait. And that's why tournaments are great because you can get value. So kind of summarizing it, I would say focusing on, um, a digital delivery system, to the phone for every player, notified on every weekend when the racing's decent. Here are some tools. Here is some information, and that in of itself is not something that the executives at racetracks can produce. They just don't
Right.
have the intelligence. They don't know how to use AI to be able to help customers understand how to bet on racing. Like, and it's not their fault because we've dedicated decades to it. So it's like that is the number one hurdle is getting the right tools available to the players so that they can understand, more than they do and understand. See, this is the other contradiction is what if I told you that 95% of the bets at the racetrack or 90% of the bets at the racetrack are not actually that good?
Yeah. Yeah.
And if you're a racetrack, last thing you want to do is tell people don't bet racing, right? So they have that
Right.
as
Right.
their other influence. So now it's like, and I'm talking more about the introductory engineer that's learning the game that needs to bet tens of thousands of dollars a year to be considered a true possible long-term customer. So I think if you put them in buckets, you get these clients to come to the track. Hopefully they're younger, but some of these older guys can potentially shift from trading or sports betting to horse racing given the tools. They have to have some tools. They have to have a community that is actually authentically derived and like a business. There needs to be accountability, and there needs to be tracking, and there needs to be responsibility, and there needs to be goal setting. So there's a lot of, I think, structure from us, from people like us. Like when we're talking about the Preakness, you said, okay, I don't want to bet a horse that's below 10 to 1 or whatever it's going to be. And you might change because maybe something changes in the race and you're entitled to do that. But I think having these boundaries and this communication is really vital. And then you think about, okay, once they're playing the game and they're interested in this, like maintaining their interest is also
Right.
a challenge. And that's where the influencers and the social and and like you said, the competition, like contests are fun, even if it's small contests. I helped out this group at Del Mar last year. It was a bunch of doctors, and my buddy said, hey, just come by and let's have some fun. And I was like, all right, well, let's do a little baby fake contest where each person puts in a couple $100 in the pot, and whoever has the highest ROI wins. And you could limit it to win wagering and just have something really simple. But
Yeah.
it's so intricate, and there's so many levels. And that's where I think we, as the horse players, we have to do something and innovate, and we just can't rely on the industry anymore.
No, no. We can't wait for the industry. I think that's the key. We have done that. Shame on us for not doing more earlier, but it's not too late. And if we, as long as we keep pushing forward, I just remember this, it was like Walter Payton, the great all-time running back, Chicago Bears. I just love that his whole thing was just like he'd carry
Mhm.
defense backs on his shoulders, but he's still moving forward. You move one leg in front of the other, pick up that extra yard or two. And that's kind of where we're at right now. There's more weight on the shoulders, but we got to keep the legs moving forward here. Otherwise, it all collapses. So, and I encourage, as you've just done, don't push it off to what are they doing? It's, again, what are we doing?
Yeah, spoken like a true Leo, a true leader. I like the positive optimism, and I think, like, it's a it's a simultaneous movement. We have to fight the forces that exist, which are, these are delicate animals that get hurt easily, and there's always that issue. We have to fight this HISA thing that's, you know, very tricky because they're looking out for the horse, but they're also, you know, reducing the amount of racing. But again, we have to look out for so it's a complication.
Sure.
But we also have to think about, the fact that the industry, has such a high takeout, and they have to support this industry, and it's, holding on by a thread, and they have technologies at their fingertips that can actually change things. And like this whole CAW thing that's happening right now is so we're going to get past it at some point. It will be not that big of a story in probably, I think, a year or two. But we have these different groups of customers, and I'm thinking the more I sit on this, that the customers aren't as price sensitive. Like you and I are price sensitive, and I don't know how many
For sure.
horse players are really high price sensitive. It's probably less than
Less than we
definitely
think. Yeah.
probably less than 10,000 or 20,000 that really are price sensitive. You know what I mean? Out of the hundreds of thousands that are active. So that said, it's almost like we have to have these buckets. Like we have to have the traditional pools where, you know, those that pay more and and want access to the pools to make, hundreds of bets, they can do that. You can cut them off at 2 minutes or not. Like that's an option as well. But they'll find a way in the pools. But I wanted to bring up to you, one of the things I spent, 5 years, 4 years working on was Betfair and trying to legalize the betting exchange.
Right.
It's interesting with Kalshi, you know, gaining so much momentum. Granted, they're taking a fraction by fraction, in terms of their revenue on the volume, but that in of itself is an interesting. There's two things there. There's the customer acquisition tool of people that gamble on Kalshi, that those customers are, ExpressBet will pay $200 for a customer right now. How much are those customers worth to have an experience in a win pool on horse racing, right? There could be
Right.
limits, or there could be certain things done on. You could have a Kalshi system that says, okay, nobody can bet more than $50, on a race, and you can track by IP and make sure that nobody can like have multiple accounts. And yeah, there's going to be a few people that might have 50 friends that can bet up to a certain amount. But if you limit it on Kalshi to $50 a person, you have instant access, and you do some marketing and promotion, and you put in the some big race, and it's visual. So imagine if you're in Kalshi and you actually get to see a race, or I don't know, there's a partnership there that needs to happen just to get to these millions of interesting trader, gambler types. But then you have the traditional fixed odds with Betfair that has been going on forever. And I think you could do the same thing there, and you can have limits and, have it, designed for a retail customer that's more casual, but might be price sensitive. And it does
Sure.
take a lot to bet a betting exchange. So I don't know. Do you think that there could be a world where we could do like the industry, or certain tracks or certain days could do a promotion with Kalshi, and like a promotion with a betting exchange? Well, the thing about the Kalshi too is it's instant. There's no regulation. You don't have to, get government approval. So it's
Right.
almost,
Yeah.
it's like a fast track.
Yeah. I've always liked the sampling theory. I mean, if you're unable to get people to sample it, and trial it, then what's the point? If it's just we're going to roll. If it works, it works. If it doesn't, we shut it down. I think there's so many ways, and that you just obviously mentioned a couple of ways to pilot, to at least try some of these opportunities, some of these ideas that completely make sense, both to the casual player as well as those that are more engaged. But if we if we don't do anything, then again, shame on all of us.
Yeah, like you said, the industry is very protective and defensive, and it's monopolistic. So that comes with its own set of challenges and egos. But that's kept the game alive, granted on life support. But um, we have to, it's like honoring your elders. It's like you have your grumpy old, uncle, or, your grandfather that, doesn't listen to you. And granted, he's built this amazing home, or he's designed, this lifestyle that's you're a part of, right? So I think it's like paying respect to the horsemen, and the executives, and the regulators that need things to be at a certain level is critical. But I think this resistance that is so innate to every person who isn't, with all due respect, they just don't understand this game from a tech perspective. They haven't worked at startups, and they don't understand it from a betting perspective. So they don't see the real value, and coming up with new bets and things like that. It's not going to save the ship. It's going to just delay, the iceberg. So for me, it's like, let's, I think this conversation is, and this is just kind of organically coming out, but I think we can maybe encourage more dialogue about, I would say, and by all means, this is just one conversation we're having, and we can have more. And I want to open it up to more horse players that do think about growing the game. But I think the initial pitch that I have is, let's have the biggest races, like at Naira this summer, do a $50 minimum or maximum bet on Kalshi for the Belmont, or maybe the Belmont's too soon, or um, the bigger races there, Travers, or Whitney, or
Travers.
whatever. Let's do a minimum, or maximum $50 per customer, and let's experiment and let's
Yep.
see what happens. Because if you don't experiment, you have no data and you're always going to be wondering. And then when the handle drops for the Belmont 5 million or 10 million, follows suit, it's like, at what point, like when I was working with Scour, which is a digital media company competitor to Napster back in like 99, like we told the CD industry, your sales are going to plummet. And
Right.
they would drop, from 15 billion or 10 billion, or whatever, to like, I can't remember the numbers, but it would go down to, 20%. And then all of a sudden it nosedived. And
Right.
thankfully, not thankfully for us, because we got sued and for like, God knows, 20 billion or something. And from all the motion picture associations, everybody sued us. And so we shut down. But the interesting thing was when Steve Jobs came along, even though we pitched iTunes, we talked about these digital celestial jukeboxes in the sky that can help have and house all the music in the world. It took Steve Jobs, because Steve Jobs is Steve Jobs, and he has this iPod that can protect it in ways that the other iPods couldn't. And they were ready when the bleeding, they were hemorrhaging. So I just hope that horse racing doesn't hemorrhage, and that little steps. Imagine the PR if Naira said, we're going to let people on Kalshi bet on horse racing, one race, $50 maximum, have at it. And they did a big promotion around it. Now, granted, there needs to be trust that they have this agreement, and then there's a contractual agreement that says, okay, you can only take these bets based on our agreements. But it's the idea of like, of not just resisting everything. So that's I think, to answer our question, which is kind of cool that it kind of came out of nowhere for me. But I think that if we can start with something like that, that could potentially also, it's going to offer a better price. We know that
Right.
the odds are going to be
Right.
lower, but even if it's 5 million in handle, at normally 20%, that would be what, 1 million that's split between the horsemen. So 500K. Like, if that's how much money would normally get, are those customers actually going to skip horse racing and all the normal apps and go to Kalshi, open an account, and bet their $50? Like, it's a different customer. And I think like those are the kind of steps that we could take that would, at least open the possibilities. But I mean, I think you said some really good things too. We have to have more dialogue and experiment and adventure.
Yeah, I think the two challenges that two of the many challenges we face, you mentioned it earlier about sort of respect all the executives in this space. I can only imagine what they've got to deal with every day operationally
Yeah.
just to keep the doors open and manage these facilities. I totally get that, totally appreciate it. I would never want to do it. And I'm sure these guys and gals feel like, it's a thankless job many days, right? And then the other challenge is that there's not a lot of new blood that would go, oh, hey, with my career and all of this great innovative experience, I want to come into horse racing. So what you have is you have people who've been in it for a long, long, long time. So it's hard to get fresh new blood, and fresh new blood usually, especially when they do cross industry, is really one of the avenues for reviving or accelerating the next trajectory of growth for a specific industry. So we just don't get enough of that. But there, like you said, there's plenty of innovators, creative thinkers, that have business background, have the ability to educate, have the ability to even set up testing infrastructure. Because if you're not taking 20% of your marketing budget and doing testing
Yeah.
constantly,
Yeah.
how else do you learn and grow and advance? So this would be one of those, you pick your plays, you got to be careful there, but um, this would be one of those tests of that 20% of your budget. It'd be one of the tests that you could do on Belmont Day and Kalshi, $50 max. Why not?
Yeah. It's like, if you think about all the great innovations that have happened, I mean, nobody knew. Like, nobody knew. Like,
Yeah.
I mean, Uber was not expected to be Uber. It was supposed to be a high-end limousine company,
Right.
like for black cars. Um, Things surprise you, and the momentum is the momentum. You cannot project momentum, and it can't it can't just be a one-off type thing either. It's got to be a designed long-term plan. So we're talking about, let's sign a 2-year deal with Kalshi. Let's limit them, because if you do agree that you're coming to the table, um, once you do that, you have a relationship, you have communication lines of communication open. It's not adversarial, and then like, who knows? Like the challenge here too is, if Kalshi got shut down, if it got shut down, like let's say like a new administration comes in and says, "Nope, can't do this anymore." The
Right.
first thing that's gonna happen is you're gonna get 2 or 3 companies offshore that are gonna open up similar Kalshis, that are gonna go ahead and do their best to live outside of America and leverage this. The cat is out of the bag. It's not
Yep.
going away. So it's like, when you realize these forces that are beyond your control, you kind of have to surrender. And it's like Darwinism. It's like, not the smartest survive, it's those who adapt. And
Yeah.
so,
Yeah. It's it. Yeah. Adapt or die. No doubt. Yeah. And, but yes, I am an eternal optimist. Love it too much to see it die.
so
And we're only two people, but it's amazing what two people can do. And obviously, there's a lot of us that are following this, and others that would certainly rally alongside of us.
yeah, well, I'm going to open this up as a regular part of the show. I'm going to start inviting more and more players. Obviously, I want to highlight the performers. That's like a big part for me. Is we work hard. Gamblers don't get a lot of recognition in horse racing, but I do like the idea of using this platform to um, to open it up. And I'm gonna invite, if there's anybody that watches this, or that, I'll continue to promote this idea of creating bigger think tanks around innovation in horse racing and pushing the envelope. Rapoli is doing a lot to, shake the old guard, because
Right?
we cannot survive as the status quo. It
Yeah.
I mean, we can have 4 tracks, maybe 2 of them or 3 of them in Kentucky, and, maybe 1 or 2 in one in New York, and then that's horse racing, and then it's in 50 years gone, and that's okay, because sometimes the market decides. And if the market says that horse racing is too hard of a game, and it's too expensive, and it's too complicated, and it's too dangerous, then okay, let's accept that. But I think that, as you have illustrated before, it's one of the greatest experiences in all aspects, from the horses and seeing them up close, and the fact that man came over to manifest destiny on horses, that, the relationship with these incredible animals, the grace, the predictability of trying to solve a really, really crazy puzzle that, keeps us going, and it keeps our egos like excited to try and, discover these secrets. But I'm down to, like, to do more of these talks. And, I know you do a lot with Horse Racing Nation, and you've gotten, you are kind of one of the voices, the biggest voices. You and Mark and Ed at Horse Racing Nation can really, tell a lot of stories and communicate. And you have a great data set there, and people can research, and then they can get experiences, from learning about how to bet on the Derby and stuff through your products. So I think it's just a matter of, like, this isn't like halftime. Like, this is the 2-minute drill. We're in the 2-minute drill of horse
Yep.
racing. And it's like, California's racetracks are probably going to close in the next couple of years. It's not something that it's going to, make me happy. But inevitability, given the economics and the value of the land and the city councils and the lack of growth. So I think it's on us as customers to stand up for horse racing and start demanding change and contributing. So yeah, I think you and I both have that passion. It'll always keep us as good friends. and competitors because, certainly, I wasn't that happy that I didn't have Golden Tempo. But
Oh, there have
but
been plenty of contests I played against you where I wasn't happy about trailing while you were out there getting it done. So
well, what's funny is if you would have played the Twin Spires contest, you might have crushed that exacta and you might have won it, dude.
yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, I should have learned to. You can only win if you play. So I gotta get back more into the contest stuff. So
Yeah.
and now I'm more free and clear to do so, which is great.
Nice. Well, you're in San Diego, so I'm sure we'll get together soon. But yeah, if you anytime you want to get together and rap, well, actually maybe we'll do another episode around the Belmont or something because this Preakness is
Yeah.
there's not too much to talk about. So
I would love it. Yeah, this is great. And I think it holds a really strong purpose, for against advancing the sport that we love. So keep it going.
yeah, yeah, you too. Tell the other guys I said hello and we'll look forward to the next super screener, I guess, to see if you can keep your
Yes, you
streak
will.
alive.
Your free complimentary coffee coming to you.
Oh, is that okay? I paid for this one this year, dude.
I
I just wanted to
appreciate that very much,
yeah, of
but
course, man.
yeah, now we'll keep you to the friends and family discount here of 0.
But the irony is I don't want to be influenced, and I'm very
I
like
know. I
cautious
know.
about ever talking to anybody about any race. But when we talked about it, I definitely, like I said, the Golden Tempo was, a very, very palatable, horse. It was just I got greedy, so greed
No
killed me. But
worries. There'll be, as there's always the next opportunity around the corner.
yeah, all right, man. Well, take care and enjoy the weekend, and we'll talk soon, man.
Yeah, appreciate you and appreciate what you're doing. Take care.
All right, buddy.